Hi everybody, welcome to HEJ 250-350 Public Relations. This is week 7. We're going to be talking about public relations tools, media conferences and media releases. So today we're going to be talking about public relations in practice. This includes social media, mainstream media and lobbying. We'll talk about newsjacking, media releases and media conferences. At this stage in the unit, I'm sure you're aware that public relations is all about communicating your key messages. So these are what you want your stakeholders to know, for example, about politics, about new initiatives, about new products, about public health. It could be what your stakeholders want to know, and at the moment, in the COVID-19 crisis, that has become very important for, say, government relations, making sure the stakeholders are aware of the current situation. And conversely, what your stakeholders are likely to get wrong and how to correct them. So different stakeholders and different messages can require different message pathways. So this can include uncontrolled media, so media releases and media conferences, interpersonal media, community meetings, stalls and exhibition stands, and again, so it depends on what sort of message that you're trying to promote and the best way to do it. So with a media release, you might want a very wide range of publications to actually engage with the message to get a wider possible audience. With interpersonal communications, your message won't go that widely, but you'll be able to create a far deeper relationship through interpersonal communications. Controlled media through websites and podcasts allow you, of course, to control the message completely, but its engagement will be limited possibly to those who are already familiar with you and maybe sympathetic to you already. So it may be more difficult to actually get new stakeholders on board because they have to seek out that media and engage with it. Interactive or social media can be very effective, especially in being able to react quickly to a given problem. It also has that sense of being both credible and authentic, but of course it can be very volatile, and social media messages can easily become corrupted or go off on tangents or whatever. So it can be useful and can be effective, but can also be very problematic. Special events, products launches, etc. They can be costly. They have to be appropriate. They can go wrong, but again, they can be very effective if treated properly. And sponsorships, grants, and research can also be very effective. Is very usually towards a very targeted public relations campaign for very targeted stakeholders, but again, adds an organisation's name to research or some such thing that provides credibility and is also a key part of corporate social responsibility. And again, alliances, professional organisations with industry groups, etc., is similar to that too. The tools of the PR trade. So staged events, media conferences, speeches, presentations, launches. Publications and websites. These can be sent directly to identified stakeholders. Again, can ingrain a message for those sympathetic stakeholders, but maybe slightly more difficult to actually, if your objective is to convince and build on your number of stakeholders. Media monitoring can be very effective, and this is often conducted after a campaign just to see how deeply and effectively a campaign's message is transferred into whatever narrative your stakeholders are engaged with. It could be a national narrative, it could be more targeted than that. Lobbying, the creation of a person relationship between a lobby group, which is often a PR company, and whatever power brokers your target audience, and this often happens in a secondary level where you want the power brokers to enact some sort of activity that may be legislative change or some such thing like that. Media releases at the other end of the spectrum are traditionally very cost effective and can be an effective form of public relations where the PR company uses the mainstream media and uses the the reach and scope of the mainstream media to convey its message and broadcast its message. And then social media, of course, allows PR practitioners to interact directly with stakeholders. They can redirect contradictory messaging, and also it can happen in real time. So it's very agile form of media. Public relations in practice. In practice, a PR campaign often uses a variety of complementary tactics and tools. So a media release may be put out in conjunction with a press conference or an advertising campaign or something like that. And of course now as there is more and more media, things like a social media campaign and a mainstream media campaign are often put together. Positive campaigns designed to gain public attention, often such as the promotion of a product or service, may use social media, mainstream media, celebrities and other high-profile tactics, whereas lobbying may be conducted further away from direct public attention, but it is still a form of public relations. I'm going to look at two case studies now. The first is for a British company and a British product. It's Greggs vegan sausage rolls. The second one is to look briefly at how media companies and big tech companies in the US were lobbying in the US and towards the US government. So my first case study is about vegan sausage rolls. In 2018, the UK food company Greggs launched a vegan sausage roll, and the accompanying public relations and promotion campaign became one of the most celebrated and beloved of 2019. The company used a variety of PR tactics across multiple media, but what is significant about the campaign was that it was conducted with a great deal of heart, with a great deal of humour, and treated its audience with a great deal of respect and intelligence. The campaign began with semi-controlled media, so via social media, and it encouraged people to do their own social media reviews. And it also stepped into the more traditional and conventional way of becoming part of the news cycle, and we'll talk about this a little bit further when we talk about newsjacking, but did so in this reasonably nuanced way where it elicited a response from Piers Morgan, who is famously and fiercely anti-vegan. So by using his celebrity and by anticipating his negative response, it raised awareness of this product. It didn't help that Piers Morgan is a very notorious and contradictory character with who a lot of people love to hate. So it for the product itself and for the company, his dislike of the product was had an ironically positive result. Bear with me. I'm just going to find a few examples. If you just bear with me while I negotiate around my computer. So this is this is an advertising campaign, a very short advertising campaign that was first on social media for the Greggs sausage roll, and you can see again by playing on that particular irony, they used the object of the sausage roll, and I mean we can get into this in a reasonably complex way, but they took a sausage roll, which of course is possibly one of the most pedestrian of all foodstuffs, one of the most down home and low tech of foodstuffs, and they situated within a very sort of high tech narrative for its campaign. And this, as I mentioned before, this was on social media before it was on YouTube or mainstream media. But of course, you can read into this that the fact that it was a vegan sausage roll, and it's the meat product was, something brand new. It can elicit that sense of novelty or that sense of newness within that. So I'm just going to show you this this little very short commercial, which is quite fun. You can see that there was a very strong hailing there um, of commercials by high tech companies such as Apple, etc. And the little squares at the bottom looked very much like the Microsoft squares and things like this, and so it was very much playful on a pre-existing advertising narratives. I'm just going to show you a little bit now of where they brought Piers Morgan into, well, they brought a vegan sausage roll into Piers Morgan, and his dislike was palpable, which of course was anticipated and very much accepted by the the company's public relations campaign.
He turned up.
Here we are.
Here are the Greggs vegan sausage rolls, even though they're not made of sausage. They're made of fake sausage. It's gastronomic appropriation.
Oh, we've bumped into the Morgan's meat stand.
The vegan sausage rolls have hit Morgan's meat parlour. There we are.
Clearly a bit of a buster.
Let me try one of these things, right? These, I mean, they look... what are these? The sausages or the vegan ones? What
These are the vegan ones.
Vegan ones?
See, you can barely tell the difference.
I can tell.
I mean, they stink, right,
No,
for one.
they're delicious.
Right?
They're delicious, actually.
Because they've got the same seasoning.
God.
I like them. They've got nice crisp pastry.
Yeah.
The vegetarian sausage is nicely flavoured.
That's a good look, Piers.
Oh, my God.
I would eat
Why would
that.
anyone eat this?
Because it's really tasty.
Yeah,
nice.
because everyone goes to Greggs to be healthy, right? Seriously? And by the way, while we're at it, we got vegan Happy Meals at McDonald's, because everyone goes to McDonald's to be healthy, don't they? Right? Rather than go there, have a Big Mac and stuff your face with large fries. And now we got...
So there we had Piers Morgan and the lovely Susanna Reid, her disagreeing on the tastiness and value of the Greggs vegan sausage roll. So but you can see from the beginning of the clip. I'll just bring this back here. Things like the Greggs watch scene there. This was a very orchestrated campaign, despite the hostile reception from Piers Morgan. Certainly it got the attention of the nation, and it situated and inserted the Greggs vegan sausage roll into the narrative. And you can see that it became very much a part of the discussion around public relations at the time and on the day, and they had these little public relations, this little, I guess, publicity stunt where they would send out these sausage rolls in these boxes that looked very much like either, say something like Apple, an iPhone box, or a Samsung Galaxy phone box, this crisp white nice box, and there was unboxing videos, etc., of these sausage rolls. So again, it's very, very sort of playful, very sophisticated, and did what it was meant to achieve in so far as getting interest and narrative about these sausage rolls into the public discourse. You'll just see on the side there, Piers Morgan did write something very rude, and there's this great little retweet from Greg saying, "Oh, hello Piers, we've been expecting you," in this very sort of James Bond-esque way of introducing the upcoming conflict. The second case study we're going to look at is media and tech companies in the US and their lobbying. This is very much at the other end of the spectrum from the Greggs vegan sausage rolls, but very interesting in itself. So in 2018, the top 9 tech companies in the US spent $77 million on lobbying. And this is less than the big pharma companies, which spend 280 million, and the oil companies, which usually spend about 200 million a year. But it is pretty high, and it's higher than the banks, and it's higher than a lot of other lobbying organisations in the US. And most of the lobbying revolved around securing government contracts. So, for example, Amazon wanted the US government to lease Amazon's cloud storage rather than maintaining its own. And what is interesting and what is controversial about this type of lobbying is that, and this is the American example, and I apologize for not having Australian examples here, but I think it's interesting to look at the US as well because of the amount of money, and this is where these big tech companies are based. It's controversial because it is public money that is being spent. So it is public relations which is occurring in, if not in secret, at least behind closed doors. It is not, it is not a campaign that is run to the public. It is a public relations campaign that is run, away from that. I do have a clip here to show you. So this is a very interesting article, and the link to this article is there. I didn't have a grab of this. I wanted to show it to you live like this because it has this really interesting little interactive infographic to show all the different companies and who is spending the money. So these are top tech companies. There's Amazon, Oracle, Microsoft, Google, Apple, Facebook, etc., and how they're spending money like this. But the whole article is very engaging and very interesting, and does articulate how much capital and how much money is spent by these companies. And we've seen in the last few years a kind of a leeching or a little bit of scrutiny going on companies, for example, on Facebook over their content and how it might be used by nefarious organisations, or how its live streaming can be abused and that sort of thing, and how it becomes part of scrutiny, and how the publicity machine must function to counteract that, and things like this. And in other fields, things like Amazon's income tax payments to particular countries and that sort of thing, and how the company might react to that. So these companies are really worth looking at in terms of how their public relations functions and how they sell themselves to both the public, but how also what they're lobbying for in that behind the scenes sort of way. Right, I'm going to move on now to newsjacking, which is, again, it can be more at the playful end of the public relations campaign. This newsjacking is the process of using an existing audience that is created by a current news event to promote your own idea or campaign. So newsjacking relies on using something that is at that moment high on the news agenda. It's already there. There's already discussion about it. It may be positive, it may be negative, but it generates its own sets of knowledge of which the new, I guess, interloper company, may come in and draw on. So it can be seen, I guess, if you're thinking about it within the logic of biology, it can be seen as parasitic in some way. It is the idea of taking something that exists and it has its own energy and drawing on that energy for your own ends. Newsjacking campaigns can either match or contradict the original campaign, but they do need to work with assumed knowledge created by the first one. So the example I have here is the Peloton Wife campaign, which became target of a number of newsjacking campaigns. So the Peloton Wife was this. You may be aware of it. This sort of kicked off at the end of last year, around Christmas time of 2019. And there was a campaign for a type of exercycle, stationary bike called a Peloton bike. And in this commercial, the commercial was heavily criticised for its patronising tone and sexist overtones. It was a commercial where a husband gives his wife a stationary bike for Christmas, and she, uses it to make herself fit. But it was very its tone and content was heavily criticised, and because of the subject matter, because of the tone, because of the moment that we're living in. A range of parodies of the campaign were launched, both in terms of social media of just private people making their own parody of this, but then other organisations drew on the zeitgeist, drew on the information and the knowledge and the assumptions and the opinions about that Peloton Wife campaign and used it to their own ends. And I just have some examples to show you here. So just this was the original Peloton Wife campaign, and I think this is just a little clip of this, so you'll get a sense of what it was like.
A Peloton? Give it up for our first time ride.
All right, first ride. I'm a little nervous, but excited. Let's do this. 5 days in a row. You surprised? I am. 6 a.m. Yay.
Rising with the sun.
That was totally worth it.
Let's go race in Boston. 50 rides.
She just said my name. A year ago, I didn't realize how much this would change me. Thank you.
This holiday, give the gift of Peloton.
So that was the original campaign. That was the original campaign. Then we had... Sorry. And that is some of the controversy around it. And it became something of a meme. So when something becomes a meme, it becomes a part of a popular culture, which is, if we go back to our beginnings, it was something of an uncontrolled media. That the public can use it, can disrupt it, can problematize its message. And by that stage, it's very difficult for the original public relations message to be drawn back. I think the public relations company pretty much has to let it go by then, and start from the drawing board again in some way, because already it's ironic. Reading has become what the campaign has been known for, rather than its more obvious or what its official meaning is. And I guess where we use our example of newsjacking is the example of Aviator Gin. Aviator Gin was a company that was a boutique gin company from America, and Ryan Reynolds, the actor, was the spokesperson for this gin, and very much took up the persona of the kind of the hipster boutique, slightly ironic play on gin, which was seen as a drink that was generally for an older audience, but they were trying to bring it back to a younger audience, and it had sort of a prohibition era notion to it. So Aviator Gin certainly drew on that for its logic, and it's a great product, and very much very smart marketing towards the product. But what Aviator Gin did in this instance was that it actually employed the actress from the original Peloton Wife campaign to be part of its more recent campaign, but in doing so, got her to reference her previous role as the Peloton Wife. So very much the Aviator Gin campaign was drawing on the knowledge of the Peloton Wife campaign. I'll just show you this.
You're safe here. To new beginnings. This gin is really smooth.
Yeah.
We can get you another one
If you like.
You're safe here. To new beginnings.
To new beginnings.
There you go. This can be a fun night. There you go. Take this too.
Really? You look great, by the way.
Sorry, I will go back to my my PowerPoint. We could be watching great ads all day, but that's not what we're here for. So yes, you can see that the aviation company strongly drew on the existing knowledge of the Peloton Wife campaign. I guess newsjacking can become a lot more prevalent now in the age of social media and the age of memes, and the issue in I guess the problem and the difficulty for a company, and this is where AVA was quite interesting, was that the speed of which they can respond, because of course the production of a high-end commercial, the production of a campaign, and all the other associated things to do with public relations campaigns can be quite slow moving. So unlike say a person making a parody video in their house, the capital and the multifaceted nature of a campaign demands a lot more action, and a lot can be a lot slower. So to do effective newsjacking in a multimedia capacity, maybe in social media you can do it, but in a multimedia capacity requires a great deal of energy and speed. So here are just some rules for newsjacking. You've got to act fast. You've got to think about what you're doing and don't get caught up too much in the hype, because you never know how the original message is going to be subverted as well. So you don't want to be caught selling a message that becomes archaic before it's been well thought through. Using hashtags really helps, so you can track a story, and of course being sensitive to issues such as race, gender, and religion. It's when you're actually working very closely on the boundaries of, I guess, taste and public sensibilities and other narratives. You've got to negotiate that quite carefully. You want to raise awareness, and you want to raise interest, and you want to be on the edge of all that. But you've also got to be aware that if you step over particular lines, it will really come back and be problematic for your organisation. So you've got to tread very, very carefully. So never capitalise on tragedy or disaster. Don't sort of force it out. Some stories will just work themselves out. So for example, in the Peloton Wife campaign was criticised from the beginning. It didn't need to be too baldly criticised, because it was criticising it did their own critique of itself, and of course don't forget to be sensible, humble, or human. Okay, I'll move on to talk about media releases. And the production of a media release is very much a tool of both 100 and 200 level public relations orientated units. So I'm sure if you will produce them in this unit, and you may have produced them previously in say HEJ 160. But traditionally the media release has been the principal tool of the PR practitioner, and that has very much to do with the role of the mainstream media in public relations. So they're designed to look like a news story and can be easily used by the news media, and they're written so that the information within is newsworthy, is situated as newsworthiness. So it has particular values that is the same as a news story. To write an effective media release, the PR practitioner must be able to think and write like a journalist. So before you write your media release, you've got to establish your goals and objectives. Who do you want to reach? Again, your stakeholders, your targeted media. Is it the mainstream media? Is it specialist media? Is it particular regions? Is it particular demographics? And again, this may determine what type of media you go for as well, whether it be traditional forms of media or social media, etc. What sections of the publication do you want to target? Is this a sports orientated story? Is it a hard news story? Is it politics, economics? Is it culture? Is it arts? And all those sort of things. Why is the information newsworthy? What are the key messages you're trying to do? Can you safeguard these from an alternative reading, which is very important. Again, it can be difficult because, of course, when you hand over that information to a journalist, you are giving them license to reinterpret it if you wish. But if the message is clear and concise, you're cutting down the chances of being reinterpreted in some problematic way. News values and media releases. News values are incredibly important for everything that goes into the mainstream media, and editors and chief reporters and people, the gatekeepers within the media, are always looking for a media release to see its newsworthiness. So that's timeliness, whether it has conflict, whether it has impact, proximity, prominence, human interest, or novelty. They're very basic news values, but a news release needs to have that. So a news release saying that there's a launch of a product in a year's time, is not going to have the value of timeliness because it's too far away for the media to see as relevant. In the same way that a news release about something that is happening a geographic distance or a cultural distance away from the audience of which you're reaching, again, won't have news values. So, does the media release meet the test of news? Would it be news by itself? It's a very important thing to remember. And the other thing that a lot of PR practitioners, especially unexperienced ones, do, and they might be working for an organisation that they really believe in, that you think is doing really good work, but you've also got to situate yourself in the mind of the consumer of that news thing. So even if you're working for an organisation and you think that they're doing great work that everyone needs to know about, but you can't be blinded by your own knowledge or your own prejudice or your own sensibilities towards that. You've got to think about the target audience and about the readership or viewership of the media outlet that you're presenting your media release to. And more likely news values are presented in media release form, the more likely it'll be published in its original form. There is a contraction of journalists, there is a kind of a heavier reliance on media releases in the mainstream media, so there's a higher likelihood that media releases do get published in their entirety. You've got to decide on a hook or an angle, and again, you may have engaged with this in other units, but the notion of what is the angle of the story. So we have the W questions: who, what, when, where, why, who is involved, what is happening, when will it happen, where will it take place, what is happening. These are always questions that you should be engaging with, whether you're writing a news story or a media release. And again, these are informed very much by news values. You can also think about this in these sort of ways, like, is this an inspiring story of overcoming a challenge? Is this new research? Is this something new? Is this a milestone that is achieved or an award? It could be a retirement, it could be a promotion or something like that. It's a launch of a new product, the announcement of a new policy, an industry forecast. Again, every year, we're living in such strange times. Things are different now to how they had been previously. But things like every year, the big companies would announce their industry forecast for the year, or announce their their profit or loss for the year, such as banks or telecommunications companies or whatever, and they become indicators of the economy as a whole. So those particular indicators always become news values, especially in the business press. And then you could have commentary relating to current events, and if you're a particular organisation, say if UTAS decides to make a comment on government policy towards COVID-19 or something, then it becomes newsworthy because of the standing of UTAS within the state of Tasmania, etc. Digital media releases, more and more, the media is we're living in a transmedia world where where print and print copy, audio and visual copy and social media become all entwined together. But of course, digital media releases don't include just text or don't include just visuals. So they have infographics, like we saw before with the US lobbying campaign. We have engagement with bloggers or influencers, with live video chat, use of memes, and all those sort of things. I just have an example here. Just bear with me for a sec while I find this, and again another American example. This is the Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City and the Big Slick promotion, which is an initiative about children's health, but it's a very nice transmedia campaign, and includes celebrities. Paul Rudd is a spokesperson for it, but the campaign itself is great, and it has social media presence and sort of this mainstream media that includes print and video.
The official start of the Big Slick Weekend begins with these 6 simple words: the boys are back in town. This is the 9th year of the Big Slick Weekend to benefit Children's Mercy Cancer Center. And in the preceding 8 years, Big Slick has donated more than $6 million to Children's Mercy.
Do I have wings? One of the great things about Big Slick, there's no middleman. There are not administrative costs. Everything goes directly to the hospital.
Your child has cancer. Who wants to hear that? Nobody. But our cancer team has to tell that to a new family on average every other day.
How can you not empathize with another parent if you heard those terrible words that Dr. Arman mentioned? God forbid anything like that would ever happen, but if it does, I would love to know that there's a place like this that I could get help.
Can you touch your nose with your tongue?
We leave here with a bank full of smiles and love, and it feels a little like we're getting too much credit because we are getting so much in return.
Everyone says, what's your favorite part of the weekend? And across the board, they all say, come into the hospital. And like being here and meeting the kids and going from room to room, it has an effect on all of us.
Thank you. This is Kansas City's hospital, so hopefully people will take what it is we do and then run with it. Children's Mercy is a jewel, a Kansas City treasure, and we as Kansas Cityans have to take care of it.
So you can see that all the information that is presented there could be presented in a media release, but it's far more engaging and far easier to see and to convey, and the emotional response that you can convey in a video like that far outstrips what you can do with just a text-based media release. I'll just move on to our last topic of the lecture, which is media conferences, also called a press conference. It's a staged PR event where individuals or organisations will announce information to the media. And it's often used by politicians and political campaigns, but also, of course, in emergencies and lawsuits and promotions. It's used across public relations, but it's so ubiquitous and so important. And of course, right now, we are getting information all the time via press conferences. You can just see them as the model. You have, you can have one event and multiple journalists, and from that you can go to multiple media, including social media, print media, and traditional broadcast news media. So they're very efficient in terms of the way that they. The way the information can be processed. And if you look at something like the ABC, often they will broadcast the whole of a news conference. It won't be edited to fit into a news program format. They will just broadcast the whole conference, so all the public can get all the information that it can get. A big interest of mine is public service media. and this is a really strong example. So, a whole press conference about COVID-19 and the initiatives that are happening each day, and when Scott Morrison and Brendan Murphy go and speak to the public, it's not great television in terms of it's not riveting and it's not changing and it's not it's not edited quickly or in any way at all. So it doesn't fit into that commercial structure that, say, it would be on a commercial broadcaster, but it's fitting the whole logic of just getting the information out there to the public. I've got the point here that unless it's a massive news story, most media conferences are not seen in their entirety by the public. But of course, again, to situate this within the times that we're living in at the moment, they are. So the advantages and disadvantages of a media conference. And the advantages in a media conference, the spokesperson does not have to repeat themselves to journalists because there's lots of other media around there. We're not reliant, the public or the stakeholders are not reliant just on the interpretation of one particular journalist. There's a whole lot of different media there. The announcements will have maximum impact by going to all the media all the time. It reduces the potential for media organisations to miss the story, or certainly for the stakeholders to miss the story if the journalist for their particular entity doesn't get it, so someone else will. And it also allows journalists to share the load in terms of questioning. If a particular journalist can't remember a question or forgets to ask one, hopefully the other journalist will ask as well. Now, the disadvantages, it is not an exclusive for the media. Everyone is getting the same message at the same time. And these kind of media events can give false importance to an announcement or issue. If there's a lot of pomp and ceremony attached to a media conference, the stakeholder, the audience may think, well, this is an important event, but in reality it may not be. So there needs to be a level of knowledge and experience from the stakeholder as well to be able to interpret the value of a particular press conference. And in the era of social media, a media conference may seem antiquated and old-fashioned, and in a way they become quite performative. And you see this a lot in the US with Trump and his, in the press corps there, all lined up for the daily briefing. It's quite performative. It doesn't sort of need to be there in some way. It could be performed in some other form, in a way, but it's still giving that semblance to the expertise and the significance of the mainstream press corps, which I think nowadays is still really, really valid and is even more valid now than ever. Okay, that's all I'm in the lecture today. I hope you enjoyed it, and good luck for the rest of your week. Thank you.